Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend. So I hope everyone's having a fun Spooktober. I'm having a great one so far. And for me, every time I lay out or kind of get a rough idea of what I'm going to be watching this month, I like to do a good mixture of familiar comfort horror movies that I kind of like to watch every year, or I kind of alternatively swap out for other horror movies every other year. And I also like to mix it up with horror movies that I haven't seen before. And so just last month to pregame for Spooktober, I did a ranking of the entire Scream franchise. I'm a big fan of that franchise, and for those who are interested in seeing that, I'll link it in the description below. But one area of horror that I find interesting that I'm not that all familiar with is the era of Scream ripoff movies. And there were two that came up the most when I was kind of doing some mild research on this, and that is I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend. So I watched both of these movies for the first time. I watched I Know What You Did Last Summer today, just now, like over a half hour ago. And then I watched Urban Legend 2 days ago. And so I thought it would be fun to kind of do a joint review of both these movies because obviously they're both very similar and they both revolve around kind of adopting the 90s slasher aesthetic of Scream and, basically, I don't want to call these movies like rip-offs in the sense that they rip off these same ideas from Scream because it's not like these two movies in particular deal with self-aware characters who are aware of all the horror tropes or, these aren't meta horror movies. These are essentially kind of rehashes of like 80s horror movies, but with that Scream 90s aesthetic. And Scream didn't invent the whodunit genre of slashers. I mean, that's been around since, Italian giallos of the early 70s. And then you look into the 80s of movies like Prom Night, My Bloody Valentine, Friday the 13th. And so these movies take a lot more notes in terms of like storytelling and cliches from those movies than they do from Scream. But regardless, these movies were obviously put into production to capitalize off of Scream's success. So I'll talk about the movies in the order that they were released. So we'll start with I Know What You Did Last Summer, which came out in 1997. So I Know What You Did Last Summer revolves around four college friends. So on one unfortunate crazy night, these four friends, after partying and hanging out together, go driving and they accidentally kill an individual, a pedestrian on the road. And because they're so afraid of the consequences that will most likely happen to them as a result of anyone finding out about this tragedy, they try to cover up the murder, and they try to throw this person in the ocean, try to get rid of all the evidence and make it look like some unfortunate drowning accident. Only there's one problem. The person wasn't fully dead. So we fast forward a year later, and these four friends are now forced to try to solve a mystery about who is the person that sent this letter. And obviously there's some deaths, some slasher deaths that start happening around our four characters trying to solve this mystery together. And it's interesting to note that this movie was written by Kevin Williamson, who wrote the majority of the Scream movies. He wrote Screams 1, 2, and 4. He didn't write the third one, and he hasn't written the fifth or sixth one. But he's coming back to the franchise with Neve Campbell to direct for the first time and write Scream 7, which will be interesting to see. But it's interesting that Kevin Williamson wrote this movie because this is like a super cliche, straightforward slasher movie. And coming from the guy who wrote Scream, he wanted to like do a deconstruction of the slasher movie genre. It's just kind of interesting that he follows it up with this movie, which is like the most traditional, straightforward mystery whodunit slasher thriller that you could possibly come up with. That being said, I had a lot of fun watching this movie. It's cliched, but it's well directed. It's well paced. There are some great slasher scene moments. There's some great moments of tension. The mystery itself isn't like the most original thing in the world, and the movie suffers from some super obvious red herrings. And the twist at the end of this movie isn't like super satisfying. Usually with a good whodunit, you like to try to figure out before the characters do, oh, who's the person responsible behind these murders, and who's tormenting our characters like this. And the way the movie's written, it's like there's no way you could possibly guess it's this individual, because they don't show up again till the very end of the movie, and they weren't like part of the characters' lives. Like a good example is in Scream, right, where the killers in Scream are they're around our characters and they appear to be friends, and so when that twist happens, it's like, oh shit, it's genuinely surprising. The way the script is written with I Know What You Did Last Summer, there's no possible way you could guess it's this random guy, because we don't know this character. He wasn't established before, so it doesn't really matter. But in terms of just pure escapist entertainment, I Know What You Did Last Summer is a fun time. It's got that cozy 90s horror vibe, which is quite nostalgic for me. I'm not a 90s kid. I'm an early 2000s kid, but I remember these movies being around and me being too young to see them, and I was always interested in them. And I'm surprised I haven't watched this movie much sooner. But no, I had a good time watching I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's the kind of horror cheese that's fun to revisit during the month of Spooktober. So I would definitely recommend this movie for people who are fans of Scream. And if you're like me, I kind of, toss these movies to the side. It's like, oh, they're probably cheap, generic trash. And, they are generic, but they're entertaining. They both are. And that'll lead me right into Urban Legend, which is my favorite of this double billing review. I liked I Know What You Did Last Summer, but I really ended up liking Urban Legend a lot more than I thought I did. I watched Urban Legend first before I watched I Know What You Did Last Summer. And let's get into that. So Urban Legend came out in 1998. Once again, it revolves around college characters, but this movie actually takes place the majority of the time on a college campus. And the interesting premise that Urban Legend has is that there's a killer going after these students, and they're killing them using famous urban legends. So like the urban legend of the killer in the backseat, or the urban legend of a lot of these I haven't even heard before. I don't think urban legends really are a thing anymore. So I don't know if the movie has aged well in that regard, but the movie does a good job explaining what these urban legends are. So you don't need to be aware of them in order to enjoy the movie fully, but I knew some of them. The one I didn't know about the car, the boyfriend being hung above the car in the woods. I've never heard of that one. Of course, we've all heard of the babysitter, and there's a call inside the house. I mean, that's kind of how the slasher genre was even born, was out of that urban legend. Then there was some interesting, like, teenager urban legends, I would call them, with like the pop rocks and the soda. There's a whole thing with that. So much like I Know What You Did Last Summer, urban legend is a whodunit style slasher. But unlike I Know What You Did Last Summer, the person who ends up being the killer, which I won't reveal, I should probably point out that I'm going to be spoiler free for both of these reviews, because I recommend people check them out because they're both fun. But Urban Legend properly establishes a character earlier on in the movie, and it's revealed to be the killer later on. And so the twist in Urban Legend is a lot more satisfying in that regard. I will say that I Know What You Did Last Summer had probably the better mystery story, because the mystery story in Urban Legend is almost like it doesn't even matter. It's just an excuse to kind of kill off these characters in this kind of fun, strange, unique way of using specific urban legends to kill people. But what I really ended up liking about this movie was I liked how it was a lot more insane than I Know What You Did Last Summer. It was a lot more slasher heavy. Like, I would say I Know What You Did Last Summer is more of a slow burn thriller with some nice, fun slasher moments thrown in. But Urban Legend is like a slasher movie all the way. From the brilliant opening, I knew I was going to have a good time with this movie because of how awesome the opening was. We get some great horror legend cameos in Urban Legend, with Brad Dourif as being the stuttering gas station attendant in the opening, and that's still like my favorite scene in the movie. And even though he's in it for a brief amount of time, I love Brad Dourif in pretty much everything, so he's always great when he shows up. Someone's in the back seat! Robert Englund is in this playing the most obvious red herring in the world. Spoiler alert, he didn't do it, and it's so obvious, and that's kind of eye-rolling, but it's always fun seeing Robert Englund popping up and stuff. And then there's Danielle Harris, obviously, famous from Halloween 4 and 5. She's in this as well, and there's a certain energy that Urban Legend has that I found to be more fun. The movie feels more appropriate to watch during Spooktober. Like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, you can kind of watch anytime. In fact, you could watch it during the 4th of July because this movie has a scene that takes place during the 4th of July. And so that's more of a summertime horror movie, where this one kind of revolves around the time of October. There's actually a Halloween party that takes place in Urban Legend, which I love. And yeah, the movie was just more fast paced. It was more cheesy in a way that I thought was entertaining. And the kills were surprisingly brutal and really creative. And so I just had more of a fun time with Urban Legend because of that. Both movies have almost the identical amount of flaws in terms of they're both very cliched. They're both very predictable in terms of their red herrings and their mystery plots. They both contain some questionable acting. Jennifer Love Hewitt, very gorgeous individual, not really the strongest actor. Freddie Prinze Jr., he seems like a nice guy and all, but he is terrible in most movies I see him in. He's just not a very good actor. He's pretty bad, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. And as far as Urban Legend goes, all the performances are pretty cheesy and hammy, but I liked it. I thought it was fun. Jared Leto... I have to point this out. Jared Leto denies being in this movie. Or no, he actually denies knowing this movie even exists and says he doesn't remember it at all. That's really fucking weird. I don't think I believe him. I don't like Jared Leto, and I think he's not a very likable character in Urban Legend, and I was kind of hoping that his character would get killed off. He doesn't, so that's kind of a nick against Urban Legend. But overall, these are two surprisingly fun slasher movies that I think I had such a fun time watching both of them because I went into them with really low expectations. I kind of assumed that I was going to hate these movies. I didn't. I thought they were really, really fun. Tell me what you guys think of both of these movies. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Mention in the comments below. Which film do you prefer? Which film do you think is the better movie? And recommend some other Scream ripoff movies in the comments below, because I want to try to find some other ones. I doubt that they'll surpass these two. I think these two are the gold standard when we come to Scream ripoff movies. But yeah, anyway, as always, thank you guys for watching.